the statute here, 10 U.S.C. 12406, were absolutely not present, and thus the Trump administration's reliance on that section of the law was inappropriate.
Next question comes from Cameron. You are now unmuted.
Hi there, Attorney General. Was curious about, you've condemned some of the more violent acts that we're seeing at night in regards to these protests. Has there been any indication that these are coming from a specific organized group? Are these randomized? And regardless, what is your message to these people who, are kind of indulging some of this chaos?
Unfortunately, this is a scenario that we see when there are peaceful protests, and everyday people speak up and speak out peacefully against an injustice, against a wrong, against something that they don't agree with, which is a core fundamental right in the United States of America. What we see sometimes is outside folks not interested in the underlying substantive issues that are leading to the protests that are being called out and where change is being sought. They sometimes embed themselves or use the protests as cover for chaotic, harmful, destructive, and criminal actions. And that is wrong. And my message to them is, do not participate in unlawful activity. Follow the law. If you don't follow the law, we will find you and we will come for you and we will hold you accountable, as those who have been arrested on the ground have already found out. And so it's unfortunate that this is happening, and I rely heavily on the local law enforcement who are on the ground, who are on the street, who are interacting with those who are engaged in unlawful conduct. And they've indicated that that the supermajority of people engaged in protests are peaceful and lawful, and that those who are engaged in unlawful conduct and harmful conduct and violent conduct appear to be members of outside groups not related to the underlying substantive issue that is being protested.
Next question coming from Michael. You are now unmuted.
Thanks all for taking our questions. I am Michael Zinstein of Cal Matters. And so I understand that your suit will say that USC 10 12046 or whatever the government code the Trump memo cited. I understand that you're saying that the conditions weren't met, but doesn't this basically rest on whether the protests that the protesters that you just identified as being unruly and needing to be arrested, is that not a kind of insurrection? Like basically, like when is local unrest sufficient to warrant insurrection of the kind that would bring in the National Guard federally?
Very rarely, and it's important to look at the definitions here, and the key terms are one, there needs to be an invasion, so that means armed forces from a foreign nation crossing the border and invading the country. I don't think anyone thinks there's that has occurred here. I know that there's a desire and a willingness from some folks on the right to call all immigration contrary to the laws of the United States as an invasion. It's a lay term. The courts have completely rejected that view, that unlawful immigration is somehow an invasion. So there's no invasion, and a rebellion is when there's an attempt to violently overthrow a nation's leadership. An example of something that might be closer to meeting the definition of a rebellion under 10 U.S.C. 1246 might be January 6th, where there was violence. There was an attempt to overthrow the leadership of the nation, from taking it away from an attempt to take the leadership away from the person who rightfully won an election and was elected by the people of the United States of America. That does not exist here. Folks protesting ICE raids and cruel and inhumane treatment of immigrants is not an attempt to violently overthrow the nation's leadership.
But I mean, there are other examples historically. I mean, for example, in 1957 with the Little Rock Nine, I mean, that wasn't an invasion, but that was individuals, domestic individuals blocking desegregation, right? But it was still domestic. So, I mean, you didn't bring that up in your explanation. So can you pull on that thread a little on how this isn't that?
Yeah, this isn't that because that did not rely on 10 U.S.C. 12406. And so 10 U.S.C. 12406 has only been relied on once ever. Again, just to reemphasize that with respect to the Postal Service and their strike. There's other ways to invoke the calling in of the National Guard, including the Insurrection Act. And that was used, I believe it was in 1965 in Alabama to keep the peace with respect to civil rights protesters. That's a different section that the president has not relied on here. I don't think the Insurrection Act would be appropriate here either, but we are open to the possibility that things are changing on the ground, that the president and his administration may rely on one statute or legal authority today. They might change it tomorrow. So we've looked at all this. We're prepared for all of it. But the reason that the example you raise is not doesn't fit here is because it wasn't that example was not a calling in of the National Guard pursuant to 10 U.S.C. 12406, which is the only authority cited here in the executive order that we are suing on.
So if Trump uses the Insurrection Act, you're fine with that?
Please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. It is not at issue. And if it becomes at issue, if he does try to invoke it, we're ready and we will address it as appropriate. I'm not aware of any conditions that suggest there's an insurrection. What is happening in LA, worse has happened across the country. We've had peaceful protests in California where some elements devolve it into violence, even though most of those involved are peaceful protests. Law enforcement, like the biggest sheriff's department in the nation and the third largest police department in the nation, are completely prepared and ready to address that. And they have mutual aid they can call on. There are many other cities in the county of LA who are ready, willing, and able to help. There are nearby sheriff's departments in nearby counties ready, willing, and able to assist. Before mutual aid is depleted and the National Guard is resorted to, or before the National Guard is resorted to, mutual aid needs to be depleted. And if there becomes a time when the National Guard should be considered the governor of California, we'll decide whether they should be brought in, not the president.
Thank you for taking all those questions for me. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Next question comes from Jacob. You are now unmuted.
Hi, thanks so much for taking my question. This is Jake Garden-Schwartz with Scripps News. Sort of a two-parter here. Firstly, we saw the statement from the Democratic governors a couple days ago when all of this began. I'm curious if you've been in touch with any of your fellow AGs in other states and expect any of them to join onto this lawsuit, either as amici or perhaps as parties otherwise. And then picking up sort of on the unique legal questions that are at play in this, do you have any concerns that a ruling against you that sort of grants the government greater authority to nationalize the Guard could ultimately give this president far more ability to do something like this in California or elsewhere? So all that's to say, are you concerned at all that pursuing this legal route might ultimately grant the Trump administration greater powers to do this moving forward if the ruling isn't how you want it to be?
Let me take the second question first. We don't think this is a very close case at all. That clearly, based on the statute, if you just read it, you look at the ways, the one way that this statute has been invoked historically, the way that occurred, and the many instances very similar to what's happening in LA, where this statute has not been invoked to call in the National Guard. We think we have a really strong case based on the statute, based on the elements set forth therein. No doubt there's no rebellion, there's no invasion, there is no inability for the president with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. So we just think you apply the clear, unambiguous reading of the statute to the conditions, and we win. Also, the governor needs to be cooperative and engaged and part of the decision, and he never wanted the National Guard to come in. And so, I mean, that is clear as day, that statutory violation exists here. So, look, there's a risk in every lawsuit we bring. We've brought 24 now. When courts have issued orders, we've been successful in nearly every case. Are we going to be successful in every case? No, but that's not a reason to not fight for the rule of law, fight for our Constitution, fight to make sure that the president only does lawful things and not unlawful things. Of course we will. And we bring cases we think that we will win. We're thoughtful about it. We're prepared. We look at the facts and accept them as they are. We don't make up our own like others like to do. We apply the law objectively and dispassionately in our analysis, and we decide if we have a winning case. We have a winning case here. So we're confident in that. We don't think it's very close. Although I do acknowledge there's not a lot of case law in this space, because the elements, as I mentioned, where the 10 U.S.C. 12406 can be invoked are rare and infrequent. With respect to the Democratic governors, I'll say I was very pleased to see Democratic governors focusing on the issue at hand. Democratic governors, of course, have an interest in protecting their states, their rightful authority to look out for the health, safety, and welfare of their people and of their state. And they see this threat here to California's 10th Amendment rights and states' rights and gubernatorial authority as a potential threat to theirs. And their participation in their statement was welcome, appropriate, and accurate. I will also say that you saw statements from all throughout California, legislators and legislative leaders, constitutional officers, mayors and council members, supervisors, all saying the same thing about the impropriety and the unconstructive and damaging nature of Trump's actions here, calling in the National Guard inappropriately and unlawfully. With respect to my Democratic Attorneys General colleagues, yes, I've been in touch with a number of them, very grateful to them and appreciate very much their relationship and their support. Many reached out on their own affirmatively to me, knowing that our state was dealing with unlawful conduct from the Trump administration, and asked if they could help, asked if they could support. Some have been very helpful as thought partners in our analysis of the facts and the law and putting together our lawsuit. And I do expect them to be heavily engaged going forward, what that looks like, whether it's an amicus brief or some other route to be supportive and engaged, I think to be determined. But there are many eyes across this country and within the state, including Democratic Attorneys General, Democratic governors, and all of the many leaders within the state of California who are focused on this issue.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Chase. You are now unmuted.
Hi, Attorney General. This is Chase DeFelice Antonio from Politico in California. On a related item, your office launched an investigative sweep of the location data industry in March. You cited concerns about, I believe, federal immigration enforcement in California at the time. I just wanted to add an update on that. Has the investigation found any evidence of a business selling location data to ICE or any federal immigration authorities, who those companies are and if those actions are legal? Just an update there, please.
Sure. Our North Star here at the California Department of Justice and my Attorney General office is the law and the law of California and all applicable laws, and making sure that they are being complied with, followed, and that we are appropriately enforcing them and providing accountability. When we launch an investigation, we don't comment on pending or potential investigations. So with respect to the results here, when we are prepared to announce the results of our investigation, we will. I don't have anything to announce on that subject today.
And that investigation is still ongoing, though?
We don't comment on pending or potential investigations generally. If there's something that my team and I believe is appropriate for follow-up, we have flagged your question and it can follow up appropriately. But that's all I have at this time.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Ben. Ben, you are now unmuted.
Hello there. Thank you, AG, for taking my question. I appreciate it. I'm looking for the number of people who've been arrested in connection with the protests. I'm also looking to understand what charges they may face, and also which agency has done the majority or at least plurality of the arrests. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that question is probably best directed to the LA Sheriff's Department and the Los Angeles Police Department. I think it's probably also dynamic and evolving. The law enforcement officers on the ground will arrest for different reasons under different sections of the penal code. And there may be charges, there may not be. The charges may change, they may be increased, they may be decreased based on the facts and the appropriate exercise of discretion of the district attorney. So we can follow up with you to get you something that's more helpful. But I think the law enforcement agencies on the ground that are conducting the arrests are best located to answer that question.
I appreciate it. And if I can just follow quickly, what have the last 48 hours been like for you? What has it been like going through all this? I know it can't be easy through the federal government. So what have the last 48 hours been like for you and your staff and the people of California?
Well, I'll first say that for our staff, I couldn't be more proud of them. They've been working overtime. They've been working around the clock. They worked all weekend. They pulled all-nighters over the weekend to deliver to the people of California what we owe to them. Top-notch service, high-quality leadership, where we are making sure that folks are being treated lawfully, that our rights are not being violated, that the state of California's rights as a sovereign state are being honored under the 10th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, and that we take appropriate, thoughtful steps. This has been a process for me and my team where we have been thoughtful. We've been sober in our response and analysis. We've seen the pain on the ground. I can't tell you how much incoming I've received from my fellow leaders throughout the state of California, whether it be legislative or constitutional officers or city council people, mayors, supervisors. Folks are appropriately very focused on what's happening in Los Angeles and are very eager to ensure that California is treated fairly and appropriately, and that the Trump administration follows the law. So it's been intense. We've been engaged. We've also been thoughtful, clear-eyed, and objective in our review of what has happened, what the president has done, the application of his purported authority to this set of facts on the ground. And we do what we always do. We respond with law and facts, and we take steps to protect our state, uphold the rule of law, and make sure that anyone and everyone, including, yes, the President of the United States, is following the law. So, we've sued him, as I mentioned, 23 times before today. Today's the 24th. On each of these cases, and every one of these cases, we have been confident in our on the likely outcome of the case and the substance and the merits of our lawsuits, and we're confident again today.
Thank you, AG.
Thank you.
Next question comes from John. You are now unmuted.
Hi, Mr. Attorney General. John Carroll from KPBS in San Diego. Thank you so much for taking our questions. Of course, it's always hard to tell when the Trump administration is blustering about this or that. But if this threat that came through this morning when he was walking into the White House, that he would like to see Tom Homan arrest the governor, what could, should, or would the Department of Justice here in California do in that case? Thank you.
Look, I'm sure there's a lot of things that Mr. Trump would like to see. He'd like to see a third term. He'd like to see all his political enemies be punished. He'd like to see law firms that represented people that he didn't like and didn't agree with receive retribution. He'd like to see the press saying only great things about him and not saying objective, truthful things about him. There's a lot of things I'm sure he'd like. That doesn't make it legal. It doesn't make it constitutional. It doesn't make it lawful. So it's unfortunate that we have a president of the United States that is so reckless and irresponsible, so contemptuous of the law, such a repeat offender when it comes to constitutional violations and other violations. The people of this nation and the people of California deserve better. They deserve more. But such as it is, they will get from my office and our governor robust and committed and resolute action that lifts up the rights of our people, protects our state, defends our future. And the governor should have nothing to worry about because he has only done lawful things. And you saw what he said in response to that threat. He called their bluff. If they decide to arrest a governor, it will be a very significant ratcheting up of their unlawful actions. And of course, we'll do everything in our power to make sure no rights are violated and that the rights and freedoms of all people, including our governor, are protected.
Thank you. Next question comes from Tim. You are now unmuted.
Hi. Given that you see this as plainly illegal, I wonder if you can walk me through the decision to respond with a letter and a lawsuit as opposed to like an order to the National Guard to disregard the president's illegal order.
We think the appropriate way to handle an unlawful action from the Trump administration is the course that we've taken every time we've seen an unlawful action from the Trump administration, which is to go to court, present the law, present the facts, get a court order that the Trump administration must comply with, that is consistent with our view of their unlawful action. So that's the appropriate way. It's not appropriate to unilaterally make decisions. And
well, I guess there's a dueling command structure of the Guard. And so I guess I don't know what the law is on that, but I wondered if there was consideration of Governor Newsom saying, you know what, National Guard leadership, the president has issued an illegal order. You're under my command until he meets these thresholds. You know, you're not to deploy.
Yeah, you know, I think that would be confusing to the National Guard. They'd be getting two orders from two of their bosses, so to speak, who, this is a joint National Guard. It's the California National Guard. There's a state and a federal component to it. The governor is in charge, if you want to talk about the leadership structure, nearly all the time, unless there is a appropriate invocation of a legal authority by the president to exert authority with respect to deploying the National Guard. He has not done that here. But we think the appropriate way is to get a clear order from the court saying that Trump's actions were unlawful. We can do that in very quickly and rapidly with respect to seeking a temporary restraining order, which is done on shortened time and gets a quick hearing and a quick order. The Trump administration likes to ignore laws and just barrel forward. We like to follow the laws and go through the process, including going to court to secure a court order. So we think that's the appropriate way to handle this issue, to create clarity, even with respect to the leadership structure. The court should be declaring that Governor Newsom has the command here, not President Trump. And I think that needs to come from a court, not just from the governor saying it at the same time that the Trump administration has tried to exert their authority. This is a dispute that needs to be resolved in the courts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Camilla. You are now unmuted.
Hi, this is Camila Bernal with NBC News. Two things. One, do you have an exact number of National Guard members in LA right now? And do you anticipate the full 2,000 by end of day, or at what point do you anticipate that? And how long do you think they'll anticipate them staying in LA? And then I also wanted to talk about the pretext of all of this. Do you or your office or the governor have any indication of what happened at the Fashion District or at the Home Depot, and sort of what was the basis for the Trump administration in bringing the Guard here, and how does that play into your arguments?
Yeah, don't want to do too much speculation about what the Trump administration might be thinking, or also with respect to the number of troops and when they're going to arrive. But my understanding is that the initial deployment, the order is for 2,000, but the initial deployment was around 300. I think, based on the latest information I have, which of course I'll acknowledge is it's dynamic and things are changing quickly on the ground, is that it's about that number of troops that are deployed now. The order is for a 60-day deployment. So yeah, I do think that over time, the full 2,000 will be deployed. Of course, that's me trying to predict what a president who frequently changes his mind and flip-flops back and forth and is completely unpredictable with the toggle switch leadership style that he has. But I would think if they had an order for 2,000, they deployed what was readily available immediately, 300, and they'll deploy the rest as soon as possible. What day that will be, I don't know. But over the course of 60 days, will they deploy the 2,000? I'd say highly likely. That's what the order says. I take them at their word about what they put in the order. With respect to what happened on the ground in Paramount and later in Compton, we saw what was mostly a peaceful protest turn into a level of violence and unlawfulness that needed to be addressed. And the sheriff's department had it well in control with his existing resources and was able to make sure that, over the time that he deployed his resources there and calmed and quelled the situation, that it got back to the appropriate peaceful status quo that was required. So, but what the Trump administration is thinking is not something I want to speculate about. What we do take them at their word at is the statute that they've invoked, and that is what we are analyzing. The statute says that the president can deploy the National Guard if there is a rebellion. There's no rebellion. That the president can deploy the National Guard if there's invasion. There's no invasion. That the president of the United States can deploy the National Guard if they cannot execute the laws of the United States. That is not an issue either. So we just look at what they've ordered and the authority that they've relied on, and we have determined that there's no basis for the president's federalization of the National Guard and deploying it to LA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have time for one last question from Swasti. You are now unmuted.
Hi, thank you so much for taking questions. I'm Swasti with the Times of San Diego. And as you mentioned, much of these protests, many of which are concentrated in Southern California, concern ICE's recent activity, which many are calling unlawful raids and detentions. Specifically, given your office's filing of the lawsuit regarding the Trump administration's withholding of disaster relief funds until states enacted certain immigration enforcement actions. I was wondering if your office was investigating or planning to take any legal action against the ICE's enforcement actions themselves.
So let me be very clear about the federal government's ability to enforce immigration law. The federal government has the authority and the ability to lawfully enforce immigration law. It might not be what some Californians believe is good policy or is an appropriate use of federal resources, but they can enforce immigration laws if they do it lawfully. And I say the word lawfully very deliberately. Doesn't mean they can do anything and everything anytime they want. They can't violate people's Fourth Amendment rights. They can't falsely arrest people or wrongfully search people or improperly detain people. They can't racially profile. They can't use excessive force. So there's a lot of ways that in the course of an immigration enforcement action, there could be unlawful conduct, and that is not allowed. That is not permissible. It violates the law, and there's ways to remedy that if it happens. But generally, those remedies are sought by individuals who are harmed. The person, for example, who is hurt by excessive force, or who's been falsely arrested, or who's been improperly detained. Those folks would have causes of action. They'd be able to sue to seek a remedy for the harm they receive for the unlawful conduct. We are very interested in making sure that people know their rights. We've been aggressive in informing folks of their existing rights under law and how to make sure that their rights are not violated and that they exercise their rights lawfully and appropriately. We've also been very interested in how immigration enforcement is occurring. Is it happening lawfully? Are there any violations? I think it's important that there be a light shined on what's happening, what the conduct is like, if people are being treated with due process and consistent with law, or are they not? So that's an ongoing area of interest for us. That there's many aspects to the immigration enforcement question that you've asked. We're also very focused on making sure that local law enforcement jurisdictions follow existing law, including our public safety jurisdiction law, SB 54, which says that we're going to use our resources on tackling crime and keeping people safe from crime and not diverting resources to civil immigration enforcement when there's a whole department and agency in the federal government that does that. So we're very focused on lawful immigration enforcement activities and ensuring that anything that's done is being done lawfully, and that will continue to be our focus.
Got it. Have any investigations in on the part of the office kind of revealed any sort of immigration enforcement happening unlawfully, or is that kind of a pending investigation?
Three things. One, the remedy generally for unlawful immigration enforcement action is in the hands of individuals, those who are treated unlawfully. Two, we've received quite a bit of reports and concerns around what's happening on the ground, where we continue to be interested through our portal and our hotline to receive updates about what's happening on the ground with the immigration enforcement. And then three, we don't comment on pending or potential investigations, including ones in this area.
Got it. Thank you.
That's all we have time for.
Thank you, everyone, for your attendance and your engagement. I appreciate you all, and see you next time. Thanks.